Thanks so much for clicking in and joining us here on the Blue Files, the extended edition. My name is Anwar Knight, your host. On this web series, we try to highlight stories that connect our daily lives to our changing planet. And we have a very intriguing show, a real five-star lineup on the way. And to help us with that, we welcome once again our West Coast contributor, Christina Stevens. Hey, shouldn't you have sunglasses on your forehead with that sunshine you're enjoying?
I will be heading outside to enjoy it right after this. It is so nice. It's finally warm. We've had such a cold spring. Finally, the sunshine is here. And that's also why it's nice and quiet. Both dogs are outside sunning themselves on the patio. No kidding.
Well, it's like the Hilton there for dogs. I'm really jealous. We're getting a little bit of sun today, but I know there's been a beautiful stretch. Nice temperatures out in Western Canada, specifically for Vancouver and Victoria. So that's good news. I'm glad to hear it, Christina.
Definitely.
We're going to start today, though, on the coast, not the west, but the east. And this is a really exciting story because it involves a unique sanctuary that is in the works. So tell us about it.
It's a sanctuary for whales, and it is planned for the East Coast, as you mentioned, in Nova Scotia near Sherbrooke, if you're familiar at all with that area. Basically, it's a project that they're going to try and make an actual sanctuary, a space within the ocean in Port Hilford, where whales who are currently in captivity will be transferred to and where they'll actually live. So it'll be much closer to their natural environment. It'll be the natural sea bottom. There'll be all the usual sea creatures, birds flying around, the currents, so much more like a real home for a whale. To give you an idea, the place they've located that they're planning to put this, it's about 300 times the size of the biggest tank that whales in captivity usually are in. And you can imagine the difference. I mean, you know what a concrete tank looks like: glass, people peering in, some people banging on the glass, the performances, all of that kind of stuff. So it would be a dramatic difference. Now, it is costly, as you can imagine, so it's going to cost about $15 million to set this up. It also involves huge nets. They'll be held around the area with buoys and anchors into the ground. And the one challenge, of course, is that because these whales will be coming from captivity, they don't have the skills to survive in the wild, so they would have to stay there for the rest of their lives. In the case of beluga whales, that would be something in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 years possibly, and orcas even longer. The other challenge is ultimately when they choose, there'll only be about 8 whales, and it will have to be either orcas or belugas, not a combination. So it's going to take a lot to set up, and as you can imagine, even transportation.
Sure.
You have to get there
How do
in
they get
big
them there?
tanks. Tanks, massive tanks. They can go on airplanes, on trucks, whatever, and they're going to try and transport and going there in pairs. So they already have a buddy, someone they're familiar with when they get there.
Well, this is really interesting. There's so many different aspects to this. So firstly, the Whale Sanctuary Project. This is the first ever, right? I mean, nobody's ever really tried to tackle something like this. Like this in particular organization is the first to focus exclusively on whales and belugas. And they have been researching around the world for 2 years. What is the best spot for it? And they would do tests, water temperature, as well as the salinity and the impact on the environment, as you mentioned. And it's exciting to think that the best place in the world is here in Atlantic Canada. So Port Hilford, we're going to pull up a map here just so everybody can see it. So it's almost centrally located between Halifax and Sydney. And I know the locals have embraced this project because it would boost tourism. But there have been critics. So you've mentioned a couple of things. Cost certainly would be one. Is that the only aspect of this? Because I would imagine just to build it is one thing, and then the ongoing cost to keep it running.
Exactly. So to set the whole thing up, get everything going, they're saying about $15 million. They're hoping to have that done, by the way, by 2022. So it's everything's happening quite quickly.
Sure.
After that, though, that's when the questions come. It'll be about $2 million a year to keep it running.
Yeah.
So this sanctuary is based completely on donations. So that sounds great. The problem, of course, that some critics are bringing up is that, corporations, individuals can be a bit fickle when it comes to their donations, or, perhaps their financial situation changes. We've seen that a lot with COVID, that suddenly people are pulling back the dollars that they have to give to charity. So what happens if you set this whole thing up and then you can't afford to keep it running and keep making sure these whales are in good health and being fed, that the
Right.
nets are good. And that is a big challenge. The other is that although it sounds ideal and idealistic, because they would still be being fed, kept in a relatively small area, much larger than they are now, but still relatively
Right.
small. The concern is they might suffer some of the same issues as in captivity. They'd become lethargic. They would just become the whale version of a couch potato.
Right.
They
Yeah.
might become depressed. There can be personality conflicts, that kind of thing. So that's also something to consider. That although it would be better, it's obviously not perfect, but still, I mean, even the critics are saying, what, they love the idea. There's
Yeah.
got to be a way to make it work. So these, I guess, in the big scheme, are relatively small criticisms, or perhaps better phrased as questions. They're important
Yeah.
questions to ask as this is being set up. You mentioned the community, and they are
Yeah.
on board with this. They're hoping to bring some tourists to the area. Part of the sanctuary will include, some pathways through the neighboring land, that kind of thing, that people can hopefully see some of the whales from land. So in that sense, it's one of those kind of win-win.
Well, sure, and the reality is it would be a draw for tourism without question, and I would imagine there's also going to be some educational component there. Maybe
Yeah.
school groups and that sort of thing. I'm not sure if they have a plan. I don't know if you have the answer to this. Would they charge admission? That could be a revenue stream. I'm not sure. Did
At this point, they're saying no.
Okay,
However, these things can change. Again, what if the donation situation
right,
changes? So at this point, they're saying no, and they're saying they would never ask for government help.
right.
Again, though, it's impossible to entirely predict how these things evolve.
Well, and you said already they seem to have the seed money initially. We're a year away from getting it started, which is really great. And it's interesting because I understand what some of the critics are suggesting. And they're obviously, biologists or experts in the field. Yet the reality is they can't stay where they are. You mentioned just the fact that I mean, the average tank maybe goes 30 feet, 40 feet at a max. And now you're looking at a natural water space that's 300 feet, so 10 times the depth, which is one thing. And the other thing is, you need to have a solution if you're going to say we need to stop this animal parks that feature marine life like SeaWorld. An interesting example, we used to go to Florida quite often, well before COVID and that sort of thing. My kids wanted to go to SeaWorld and we chose not to. So this is another example about consumers continue to drive that. We did not want to support that. There was a documentary that came out about 4 years ago, and there was a big backlash, even locally here in Ontario with Marineland and that sort of thing. So they said they were going to get rid of, I'm talking about SeaWorld in Florida now, they're going to get rid of their orcas. And now, 4 or 5 years later, they still have them. They don't do a show per se. They call it, I think, the Orca Experience, but they still have those creatures in the tanks. So we need to provide that outlet that if we're going to say you have to stop this, here is a solution. But you said only 8, so it is also quite limiting at this time.
It is, and they believe there's about 3,000 whales and
Wow.
dolphins in captivity around the world. So in Canada, really, it's Marineland that would be affected. In
Right.
Ontario, they have more than 50 beluga whales, and a bill was passed in 2019 by the Canadian government
Yeah.
banning keeping whales in captivity, but it doesn't allow for, basically, it grandfathers in whales. They're already there. So what about these 50 whales? Do they have to live out the rest of their lives
Yeah.
in these tanks? And I mean, they promote that as part of it, there's glass walls where you can see them being fed, and there's even touching sessions. I mean, I question, obviously, whether that's the best thing for a whale
It's not.
to live through. So, so hopefully there'll be more and more public pressure, and maybe another space like this one being proposed with more rooms, so at least those 50 can find a better home for the rest of their lives.
Well, as long as this one can get going, I think it is going to open up the avenue. So this is a fascinating story. We're going to continue to follow it. In fact, I'm so intrigued by it. I think I want to do a full episode on our podcast at bigbluemarble.earth. So we're going to keep a tab on it. Promise me, Christina. We'll continue to watch that.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Whales are so intriguing.
They really, and you, of course, have a prime seat out in the West Coast in particular. Have you done that?
Yes, Of course, we've been whale watching
Yeah.
here. We've been lucky enough to be a few times in Hawaii,
Hmm.
and it's just, I mean, it's incredible. And maybe we'll talk about another time. There's a story here, of course. You know about the orcas, and there's two different kinds, and one, there's around 70 of them left. So let's
Yeah.
keep that in mind. We'll figure out a way to talk about that another time as well.
All right, good stuff. Well, we're going to switch from the sea to going to the green. We're talking about the green on the golf course. And this comes, of course, after the historic Masters that just wrapped up. And now the golf industry is starting to ramp up their game when it comes to sustainability. And there has, long been a debate, a controversy on the impact on the environment for golf resorts. Some may say on one side, they provide manicured green spaces, which can also equal to some wildlife habitat. And I guess to some extent that's true. The other side saying, typically it's not native grasses that are applied. You have lots of pesticides and fertilizers that are used. And then the basic requirement, water. You need a lot of water to keep that grass looking green, especially if you go to some of the desert states in the U.S., like in Nevada, Las Vegas. I mean, you need tons and tons of water. So that's the debate. There are some 2 million acres in the U.S. right now that are the land is used for golf resorts. And some experts are saying as the population increases, as our world changes, things like COVID, there's going to be a need for that space for agriculture, maybe for real estate, what have you. That's one thing. But I bring this up because there has been some push forward now. Talked about this on another episode about the UN Sports for Climate Action framework, where we're trying to, or they're trying to encourage the sport industry to really rally up support and initiatives, partnerships that are going to help reduce greenhouse gases and nurture it along with their fan base. So internationally, in tandem with that, is an organization called GEO. That's the Gulf Environment Organization. They have become now a world leader to help facilitate adaptation of voluntary yet strict standards here. And what's really exciting is that they have over 60 countries that are part of this initiative now. One of the newest is the Saudi Gulf Federation, so in Saudi Arabia. And as a result, there are now golf courses around the world in Asia, Middle East, and Africa that have really adapted sustainability. I'm not sure if you play golf. I think your husband does, but you can see that there needs to be a shift and a change.
I don't know if what you would call what we do playing golf exactly, but there's an attempt. When you were talking about the desert, when you fly into Phoenix or you fly into Palm Springs, Palm Desert, it's one of the biggest things you notice from the air. You're looking around in the middle of this desert, and there's a green golf course, and there's or in California, of course, there are water shortages. So
Sure.
it always makes, that's the first question I always think, where do they get all of this water to
Yeah.
do this? And it is a beautiful green space, but a lot of them are also very exclusive, very limited. So it's not like the general
Right.
public is out there using them like a park, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see why this would become an issue, even though they look environmentally nice because they're green. But
Yeah.
yeah, how about, I mean, obviously the personalities who golf can have a lot of influence on this kind of thing. Are they getting on board?
Yeah.
Or are there big names that are backing this? Or
Well, Tiger Woods hasn't said anything, but there are certainly some that are coming on board. The most notable is Suzanne Peterson. She was a pro two-time champ. She's now retired, but she has joined the cause with Geo. And really wants to be a champion and ambassador about boosting awareness when it comes to action and eco awareness. So I think that's a starting point, and I think what you're going to find, Christina, is that the sponsorship is now going to start to align with that cause. So I think it's going to grow together, in terms of the big talent, the big sponsors. They're going to say, if we're going to continue this industry, if we're going to let it grow, we have to do so responsibly. And that means also paying attention to the impact to Earth. And there were some studies, research suggesting that the industry was collapsing. And now the metrics are saying that it's actually starting to boost back up. It's starting to grow again.
well, apparently COVID is actually
And
helping it because people are getting outside. It's something they can actually do where they can
yeah,
still keep some space
yeah,
between each other. So apparently, I mean, I
true.
know here golf courses are so busy now.
Well, and especially with the better weather. I
Even
mean, the
before
West
that.
Coast is different than the East. But you're right, though. You're absolutely right. Getting outdoors and spending some time. So the takeaway is that it continues to grow. It may not be as big as it was, but it seems to be sustainable. And it's a huge industry in terms of an economic engine. There are many, many people that work in the industry, and in terms of sports, it's likely one of the biggest contributors to charities.
Oh,
If you
really?
look at all the different, yes,
Okay.
yes. I mean, many of the tournaments itself. There's another one in the Carolinas. Actually, they have just in South Carolina. They have just said that their tournament coming up in June, whether it goes or not with COVID, I'm not sure, but it's going to be zero waste. This is the first time ever.
Wow.
So they're doing everything to eliminate waste through this tournament, and they have a very large turnout in terms of the audience and that sort of thing. Again, I don't know with COVID now, but yes, and they're raising money for charity. So I think it's all there, and I think this is now going to be widely acknowledged. There's another resort in overseas. There's one of 3 golf courses that have been EarthCheck certified. And that means that they've put not only the environment into focus, but also the local community. And I want to get this one out in Vietnam, that the name of it here. And of course, I don't have the name. But it's a 17-acre rice field that meanders through the property. So you can play golf, but you can also grow a crop. And they had a 28-ton yield last year. And obviously, for that to happen, there's no pesticide use and that sort of thing. So this is a win-win.
You know what? It seems so simple. As soon as you say that, why wouldn't you have a golf course winding its way, around an apple orchard or something? I mean, it would be beautiful, and that's what you want is green space. Yeah, I could imagine that would work with all kinds of crops and fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, you're right. So we're going to watch that carefully, and we're also going to get a video of you and David playing golf.
For the
And we're gonna
comedy
post
channel? Is this the comedy channel?
Why
know,
not?
When you get frustrated and want to cheat, do not kick the golf ball. It really hurts your foot. That's all
Well,
I'm
I
saying
think
about that. Telling
these
it for a
days-
friend.
For a friend, we all need a laugh. So maybe if that's what it is, that's what it is. We're going to switch gears, though. Our final story. I think this is really cool. Nordstrom is putting their best face forward here when it comes to a new recycling program. And this is the first of its kind here in the country.
It is. They're calling it Beauty Cycle. It's a makeup recycling program. Now, it launched last year in the US, but now it is available here in Canada. Canadians can bring their empty beauty packaging, whether it's, shampoo bottles, makeup from face creams, that kind of thing, into the store to be recycled. In any Nordstrom, you'll find a big recycling box called Beauty Cycle. The reason this is so exciting is I didn't even realize a lot of things, although I'm faithfully putting them in the blue bin, aren't actually being recycled. A lot of these beauty products, because they're using different types of plastics, and a lot of them are using more than one kind of material. So for example, lotions, a lot of times with the top, there's a metal spring in there that you're using to push down, and then the rest of it is plastic. So, just throwing them in the blue recycle bin doesn't mean that they're getting recycled at the other end. They're just being tossed out because they don't have the capability. So Nordstrom is saying, you know what, we've got to do something about this. They've come up with a stat. Apparently, every year, 120 billion units of plastic packaging are generated from the beauty industry worldwide. And out of that, only 9% of that packaging is being recycled. So, I mean, this is great. And it's another one of those almost, why didn't we think of this before kind of things? And so many things can go in there that before wouldn't have been able to. And what I really appreciate about this is they're saying any brand. So it doesn't matter if you bought it at Nordstrom. It can be, an off the drugstore shelf brand. They just want to be part of the solution when it comes to this. So I really like that part of it too.
Well, that's fantastic, without question. So, and it's a great business model. So even if you're not buying the product initially from there, it gets you also to the store. I don't have a
Yes,
problem with
exactly.
that. I think it's okay, because now you're finding, because I know they're actually using a third-party company, a very well-established one that is going to be actually doing the breakdown of this, collecting it and trying to repurpose it. So that is one aspect. And when you say that, why hasn't it been done sooner? I think this is also showing, the power of consumerism. I think we are demanding that, and they're starting to understand it. Everybody has to change their business model, and this is another step forward. You know, it's interesting. If you go back to the cosmetic industry when it came to plastics, this all started in the early 1950s, and it was with a product called Stop It. So it was a deodorant spray for women, and they were
Hmm.
the first to use plastic. And it was declared as one of the most successful deodorants by Time magazine. And you have to think this is the 50s. And, we're showing some images now. So, of course, a lot of the packaging, a lot of the presentation, it was like, wow, I got to use Stopette. The name for me doesn't work, but
Yeah.
apparently it did in terms of the marketplace. But that was the first to create a product incorporating plastic. So the love affair with plastic began from that. And now, whether you use real high end cosmetics, whether it's perfume, powders, and all that sort of thing, or something from a drug mart, the bottle can look very stylish, but at the end of the day, it could be made with just resin, with just plastic polymers. And as you mentioned, a lot of them were just getting into the garbage, into the landfill, because they weren't really recyclable. And that's an ongoing issue with many products. But I applaud Nordstrom. I think this is a fantastic initiative.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it kind of comes on the heels of, a lot of the producers of these products are trying to reduce packaging.
Yeah,
Interesting, I always notice the higher end ones still have a lot more packaging because I have to give it to you in a very pretty box wrapped in a very pretty
it's
plastic
true.
so that you feel like you're getting what you paid for with all
Yeah.
of that money. I do want to mention there have been other initiatives out there. One that's been going on for years,
Mhm.
MAC Cosmetics, and I love this one. I've used it over and over. They take so a lot of their makeup. You actually they have a larger package, say for eyeshadow, that you can buy individual ones and
Yeah.
reuse that package. But if you don't want to use it anymore, or you're moving on, if you bring in 6 packages,
Hmm.
you can actually get a free lipstick from them, and they will
Whoa.
recycle the plastic and
Yeah.
use it to create more makeup packaging.
Yeah.
So that has been going on for a very long time and very, very successful as well.
Sure.
So
It's a
again,
reward
maybe
system.
yes, well, yeah, and I mean, it encourages people who otherwise, I mean, to make a
Sure.
special point of holding on to these and taking it in, it really helps to have that as a motivator. And maybe
Sure.
now companies like Nordstrom and Mac doing these kind of things, again, will push other companies to keep up.
Fantastic stuff. This has been a lot of fun, Christina. So great to have you.
Absolutely. And I'm really, really looking forward to next week as well. We've got a great story.
Hmm.
I'll put it this way, it's a sailboat that gobbles up plastic that's floating around the ocean. How's that?
Oh, okay. I love that. There's a hook.
There you go.
A sailboat that gobbles up plastic. Sign me up. I think that sounds like a win-win for everyone involved.
We'll be
So we'll
talking
look
about
forward
that.
to that story. Good stuff, Christina. Thank you so much. Christina Stevens, our West Coast contributor, joining us indeed from Vancouver Island today. Well, if you like what we are doing, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe and share what you're seeing. That's the best way to help grow the channel. And by the way, here's how you can connect with me. You can also join us on the podcast at bigbluemarble.earth. There's also a newsletter component with that, so you can check that on the website. And every Friday, join me for some fun on the Facebook Live show I call Here and There. We're doing a special stay-at-home edition for the next several weeks, and that again will happen this Friday at noon on my Facebook page. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm Anwar Knight. Stay safe and be well.